Welcome back to my channel. This is Adam Moz and you're watching Moz Models. Today we're going to fix the little oops that I made in the last video, and then we're going to configure three more items on the radios. Namely, we're going to set up the throttle cut the way I personally like it. We're going to set up some Expo and DR or dual rates, and then we're going to set up a basic timer. So, to start off, let's fire up the radios.
Welcome to ETHOS. Switch warning.
Okay. And let's make sure we're on the right model. The Spektrum is, but I've been playing with the X18, so let's go and pick the right model.
Switch warning.
Okay. SB. And here we go. And you'll notice I got a switch warning. That is to make sure that I've got all my switches in the position I want when I start the model. Okay, so first let's fix my oops. I was working off memory and did not check the manual, so my flaps are set up wrong on the NX8. Turns out the NX8 is one of those cases where flaps up is minus 100. Even on Spektrum, so we're just going to quickly go back there and change that. So this is a relatively quick and easy on any radio, at least. Okay, next we're going to set up throttle cut. So in Spektrum, you go from the menu, click once to get in the function list, scroll down, and it is right there near the top. So we click over to switch, click it, and then switch H. My throttle cut is heli style. It's always a two position on the back here. It comes out of the box with Spektrum. On the X18, I had to swap positions on these two switches on the back here, which also swaps your sliders. So your sliders get, in this particular case, the slider motion changes, but I like that because the X18 out of the box, the slider motion is the opposite of the X20. By switching them, it becomes identical, and then I don't have to reprogram every model to flip the direction. And that's because of the different style of sliders. I move from the back, not the top, on the X20. So we've got switch, going back here, so throttle cut, switch H. Now, I gotta go and click the 0 button and unclick that, because if you look here, I like forward or up to be my throttle active, and then I flip back down for throttle cut. That's different than the default, but it is the way my brain works. Do what makes sense to you, and not what makes sense to the manual. Throttle cut is one of those things that it has to be instinctive, or you're going to miss it when you need it. Now, in Spektrum, usually you go to the thing and then you do the thing on the function. So for throttle cut, you go to throttle cut, then you do the throttle cut to the throttle function. On ETHOS, you go to the function, which is throttle, and then you do the thing. So in this case, we're going to go throttle cut, active condition, and we're going to flip that switch back. So now the throttle cut is active at the down spot. You'll notice that red line there. That's your curve. So the green line moves, but the red line is flat. When I turn it on, the red line is there, and you're going all the way up. There's one other little gotcha. It's a really cool feature. I don't personally use it, and that is the trigger value. So on ETHOS, by default, the trigger value is minus 85%. The trigger value means the throttle cut won't come off unless the throttle's low. So in this case, when you're down here, turn that on, turn this nice and low, but not all the way down, it'll go live. But if you've got your throttle all the way up, it does not go live. So we're going to leave that. Okay, so we've got Throttle Cut set up. Next up, the Maule manual says you have 2 rates, and I normally set them up on ailerons and elevators only. I never do rudder rates unless I'm doing something like a 3D airplane. So, on Spektrum, up to DR and Expo. By default, you're on the aileron channel, and you got to switch on. Now, I always use the shoulder switch here for my rates. So all the way up is 0, that's my 100%. Then I'm gonna, so I've got, you'll notice it's curve 0 right there. And then on either of these two, I've got curve 1, because we're only doing dual rates, we're not doing triple. So we set it to curve 1. And we're just going to turn that down to 70%. And we're going into Expo, and we're going to dial in 10% of Expo, because I like a touch of Expo on my ailerons by default. Now we're going to go up here, and we're going to go to elevator, and we're going to again select switch B. And then we're going to go down here, and we're going to click on 2. So again, we get curve 0 here, curve 1 on both the other positions. Now we're going to go to curve 1 again, scroll up, turn that down to 70%, and we're done. Again, we went to the function, and we went to the feature, so DR and Expo, and then we did it on the function. On ETHOS, we're going to go to the ailerons, and now what we do is we add a set of weights, because you go to the function and then you do the feature on ETHOS. It's exactly the opposite path than on Spektrum. Spektrum, you go to the feature, do the touch the function. ETHOS, you go to the function, touch the feature. So I'm going to add a new one, and so you'll notice I tap there, and I'm going to go up and I'm going to pick my shoulder switch. This is the same switch, although in this case, instead of, it's got a different name, because the Spektrum name switches starting here, so A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. And FrSky starts here, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Or actually, I think it's E, F, G, H. So we're going to pick that. And then we're going to long press here, and we're going to invert. So what invert does is when it's not in this position, this rate is active. And you just saw it go bright. So that's the equivalent to checking 2 boxes on Spektrum. And we're going to go here, and we're going to just turn it down to 70%. Now we're going to go up to curve, and curve is where you do Expo. And I'm just going to drop 10% in. Actually, that reminds me, I'm going to go back to here, because I like that. I like to have Expo in my ailerons. So I forgot to do it in the 100% rate. I find the ailerons always too twitchy right at the center, so I like to soften up that center point. I only do it on ailerons normally, just a thing for how I work. Now, one thing I really like about ETHOS for this perspective is everything's on one page. So I go to my ailerons, I can see everything I've done to the basic aileron setup is right here. So if you've got a mixer, you've got active condition flight modes. You don't use that a lot in the basic function mixes. It's more for the advanced mixing. Any curves or Expo that I've got set up, weight and rates, differential if you got multiple ailerons. We've only got one. That will actually hide in the future if you've only got one channel selected. There's a bug in 1.4.7 that shows differential always, how many channels you count. And the one thing that I love is it shows you the channels. So in this case, we've got one channel. So you can see exactly what you're sending to from the mixer and from the channel. So that's a really nice view. You don't have to go back and go to the monitor every time you want to see what it's doing. You'll notice, like in the dual rates in Expo, it'll show you the curve here, which is nice. It's equivalent to right there. It does actually just very down there tell you what the mixer's doing, but not what the channels are doing. Sometimes you need to know both. So, now we want to go back and we want to just do our elevator, edit, and we're only doing a rate here. So we add a new one, we flip and get the location, and of course, we want to invert that for this one. And we turn it down to 70. For whatever reason, I don't generally find I need Expo on the elevators unless I've got a ton of throw, so I don't do it. And there we go, that's all done. Finally, we're just going to go over to timer. As it happens, out of the box, you get everything you want except for the over, and I'm going to turn that down to over 5%. So my timer is active even if it's over that. And you'll notice as we come back, it starts counting down. ETHOS, we're going to go and we're going to edit the first timer, and let's just call it TMR1. It's down, and so we selected minutes. We're going to count up to 5, turn voice on, so that's my countdown start, and finally the active condition is going to be, and we're going to go with throttle absolute. Throttle absolute is the same setup, so we'll see that, and you've got your timers on there, so when you put it up, and you've got your throttle live, starts there. Just checking one thing, with making sure my throttle cut's working. Because here's one thing I don't like about Spektrum. My throttle cut's live. My throttle's up, my timer's counting down. Throttle cut's on, my throttle's up, my timer's not counting down, because there's no throttle. This beats the heck out of that on that particular feature. So there we have it. This one was a quick and easy one. We've set three things. We've set up our throttle cut, standardized way, same way in both radios. We've set our rates, standardized way, same way in both radios. And because we changed the outputs in the last video, the rates are going to be the same throw. So 70% on ETHOS and 70% on NX Airware, they're going to come in at pretty much identical throws because we did adjust the outputs on the FrSky radio to be 78% of what they would normally be. And we've got our time, and finally we've got our timer, our basic timer set up. 5 minutes countdown. That's usually where I start for an electric. If it's something that I'm really hucking, I'll start it at 4 minutes and then just bump up the timer in 30-second increments until I'm landing at around 30-35% battery on a typical flight. And I always check, I carry a, let's get here, I've got one of these ISDT battery checkers. Spektrum, I'm actually going to buy the Spektrum one because I'm mostly flying Spektrum style IC3 packs these days. This has got an XT60 connector on it. You can see it. So I have to carry an adapter cable. But the Spektrum battery checker, I think it's an SBC100, it's exactly the same as the ISDT, except it comes with a Spektrum connector, and instead of having an S-Bus output that can read S-Bus from your receiver and read PWM values from your receiver, it's got a servo checker built in instead. So it's actually good if you've got fly both style of batteries, buy both of them. They both have some really cool features that just save you on having to have single-use items that don't need to live in your flight box. I'm a big fan. If I'm going to put a tool in my flight box, I'll take a more complex tool that does multiple things, as long as it's easy to use, so I don't have to carry 2 tools or 3 tools. Okay, well, thank you. If you like this video, hit like and subscribe. And with the next one, we are actually going to start and get a receiver bound up on both systems. So the plane's coming out, the next one, because the first thing we got to do with the NX is bind that receiver that's sitting in the airplane. With ETHOS, we will do the desk setup for the receiver, and then we'll put it in the airplane, because I'm going to go walk through. I'm actually going to film the whole Spektrum piece, then film the ETHOS piece, and I'll put them together so we're doing, in the future videos, so we're doing the same part of the setup at the same time in each video. Thank you, and once again, if you enjoyed this video, hit like, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Until I'm landing at around 30–35% battery on a typical flight. And I always check, I carry a, let's get here, I've got one of these ISDT battery checkers. Spektrum, I'm actually going to buy the Spektrum one because I'm mostly flying Spektrum style IC3 packs these days. This has got an XT60 connector on it, you can see it. So I have to carry an adapter cable. But the Spektrum battery checker, I think it's an SBC100, it's exactly the same as the ISDT, except it comes with a Spektrum connector, and instead of having an S-Bus output that can read S-Bus from your receiver and read PWM values from your receiver, it's got a servo checker built in instead. So it's actually good if you've got fly both style of batteries, buy both of them. They both have some really cool features that just save you on having to have single-use items that don't need to live in your flight box. I'm a big fan. If I'm going to put a tool in my flight box, I'll take a more complex tool that does multiple things, as long as it's easy to use, so I don't have to carry 2 tools or 3 tools. Okay, well, thank you. If you like this video, hit like and subscribe. And with the next one, we are actually going to start and get a receiver bound up on both systems. So the plane's coming out, the next one, because the first thing we got to do with the NX is bind that receiver that's sitting in the airplane. With ETHOS, we will do the desk setup for the receiver, and then we'll put it in the airplane, because I'm going to go walk through. I'm actually going to film the whole Spektrum piece, then film the ETHOS piece, and I'll put them together so we're doing, in the future videos, so we're doing the same part of the setup at the same time in each video. Thank you, and once again, if you enjoyed this video, hit like, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.